Thank you very much, and welcome to the brave new world of online. It's quite a new experience. I've got some notes, and the notes are really purely here to help me keep on track and keep in time. Otherwise, I have a time where I can actually keep talking about education because it's such a passionate space for me. I think the whole concept of technology, and I framed it friend or foe because it's been both to me in my career and to many teachers. So I'm framing this in a couple of ways, and I think we need to have a few spaces defined. And I think I'm talking about STEM as well. STEM is a new space in many schools, a space that often is used with an interchangeable with the word STEAM. And some schools have gone STEAM, some STEM, and it really doesn't matter as long as they do it properly. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. And there are also prefaces for this looking at equity. The COVID space has shown up a few issues around equity, and we'll be talking a little bit about that as well. So I just want to talk about the embedding and the use of technology, and then obviously my colleagues will be talking about specifics. Let's see how we go. I've pulled out a whole range of possible definitions for STEM, and obviously referring to STEAM. The interesting part about most of the definitions, there's one clear missing connection, and that's teacher voice. Very few of the definitions talk about the teacher or how the teacher is going to be involved in the process. And I think that's a major issue, and that's one of the reasons we're here today to talk about technology and the use of it. So I think teacher voice is really important, and I'm suggesting that we should be making sure that when we talk about STEM or STEAM in a school, and we are talking about integration of technology, the only person we should be really focusing on right at the start is the teacher. Because without a really good focused teacher using software, doesn't matter how good the software is, doesn't matter how good the technology is, if you haven't got someone who's really passionate about using it and understanding how to use it, you're not going to really get any as far as you want to go. So once we do explore, this is the question I want to think about, is what are the necessary characteristics, qualities that enable a teacher to leverage technology and the resources that are meaningful to a pedagogical tool. And we're talking about pedagogy, the actual art of teaching, the actual art of use. So I want to consider four connections that I see as underneath that space. And we're talking about a teacher as an agent of change. So it's about their knowledge, their self-efficacy, pedagogical beliefs, and the subject and school culture. Subject and school culture is really important, particularly when you start talking about STEM and STEAM in a school. Because what you're asking is a number of teachers to work across a number of disciplines that they haven't done before. So getting a maths teacher and a science teacher sometimes to actually talk to each other can be quite difficult because they're very passionate about their own space and can't see how their space might be able to be utilised by someone else. Whereas you need to have that if you talk about STEM. You need to have that collaboration. So we're going to talk about that. And I think that's important. We haven't got time to go into each of those variables. But those variables are important. So it's basically looking at, as I said, self-efficacy, knowledge, pedagogical beliefs, subject, and school culture. School culture obviously is important as well because school needs to be passionate about implementing STEM or STEAM. It shouldn't be seen as a point of difference to the school next door. It should be something that the school is passionate about putting in place. There are obviously curriculum imperatives that we need to consider. One of the major ones in New South Wales is there's no actually STEM or STEAM curriculum. NESA hasn't got a curriculum that actually covers the marriage of these subjects or ALAs. So it's important to actually understand that what we're doing is creating a program in many schools which is quite unique to that school space and can actually be quite different to a school down the road because there is no formal directive on content from the NESA, which is the governing body of curriculum in New South Wales. So technology provides us with creative and innovative ways to solve problems, and it applies us and the learner with sometimes some frustrations as well. One of the issues that I've found in schools regularly is the fact that the technology doesn't always work that well. I've been into many rooms where I've set the good laptop up like today, ready to go, you come in and all of a sudden it doesn't work, and you've got to spend some time getting that sorted. Those frustrations can be really difficult in a classroom when you've got a 40 to 80 minute session and you spend 20 minutes on trying to get software to work or hardware to work. So I think it's really important to have an imperative looking at just the nature of technology and that interface that people have with that nature of technology. Instructions are driven by problem solving when we're talking about the use of technology and the wonderful connectedness between a learner and technology and the KLA. We're talking about discovery, we're talking about exploratory learning, and we're looking at how the student is actively engaged in the situation. It's the engagement that we're really looking at when we are integrating technology. And the way that a teacher works to get that engagement happening is extremely important in the process as well. Applications, well, we look at engineering design, system thinking, maintenance and troubleshooting, incorporating into science and mathematics curriculum. We're also allowing students to explore greater depth, and we want them to actually look at subjects and utilise their learning skills. So there's a very large amount of stuff going on when a child is starting to work in a STEM environment and applying technology. It looks simple, hopefully, but at the end of the day, there's a lot going on, and those kids and that staff and that technology need to work together. Research is important, so independent and collaborative research projects are really good for helping to integrate software and to embed it into the curriculum. There needs to be threads right through the curriculum that is an imperative in terms of collaboration. The levels of communication are important, and the critical thinking skills need to be threaded right through the curriculum so that it's transparent, but it's also valued within the space. And opportunities. There's an enormous amount of opportunity in the STEM and technology space for schools to actually connect with industry and with business. So there should be a space where we are searching to look at making the integration of the technology and the integration of students into STEM and STEAM through looking at organisation with connections with organisations. It could be a research base that is a genuine space that we could get into, or it could be a major corporate dilemma that someone wants to look at, and the kids actually take that on board and try and solve the problem. Embedding, integrating, not just an ideal. The reason I wrote that is because many schools talk about how they embed or how they want to embed technology into it, and that usually means by having a really good smartboard on the board, a really good computer, and some professional learning around the use of it, and then off you go. It's going to work really well. It's not. It has to be integrated. So I think one of the big things that I've been privy to is the fact that students need to have an increased perception of the value of what they're doing using the technology. It's not enough just to use technology and be successful because I've done a Word document or I've created something in Lego robotics that I've got a car to go from here to here. How did you do that? Why did you do that? Why is that important? What are the ramifications of what you've done? Where can that take you next? What can we do next? Can we unpack what you've just done? What we're trying to do is get a student at any level, and I'm talking even kindergarten, when I had B-bots running around on a piece of paper, and they were able to get their little B-bot to run down a street. That was fantastic. They had a great time. But then we had to unpack why that was such a good activity, why that was such a good learning activity. And in kindergarten, they could even start articulating what they did. So values the students' enrollment and engagement with the technology. And I think we need to do that. And by embedding that into the curriculum, you are then getting a lot of self-worth from a student who's actually working with technology and engaging. Because it's not simply a tool, but way beyond that. That was what I was doing in the 70s, looking at that. And that was a calculator. Now we've got computers. Adding a student's perception is making it also authentic. We've got to not convince a child, but a child has to understand what they're doing with technology in this space, whether it be virtual reality or whatever, that is authentic learning, and they should be guided to unpack what that authentic learning looks like, not just assumed. Increasing the complexity with a student can deal successfully with students' general learning of the use of hardware and software, and the task needs to be supported by visualising and presenting more essential abstract elements. So we're looking at the use of technology to solve a real-world problem. It's a great way to integrate and a great way to get authentic learning happening. Dramatically enhance the students' motivation to get their self-assessment, self-esteem up. There's no doubt that students do that. We've found that in COVID at the moment, where there's a lot of research happening where students have gone online and really enjoyed the space. There are also students who haven't, and that's in the real world as well. We've got to be aware that technology isn't for everyone. And just because a child is immersed in technology at home doesn't mean they know how to do it properly at school or how to actually get the most out of that technology. And increase the amount of time a student is likely to spend on a task by allowing them to delve deeply using the technology, using the software, using whatever your STEM or STEAM program has, to actually look at their work, to revise their work, to collaborate with others on their work. So that's a new space for many schools. Some schools and some staff, and I've worked with them before, they own their space, they own the learning, and they want the learning to stay between that person, the teacher and the child. A child needs to be able to develop their thinking by talking to others and collaborating. Software should be integrated into those conversations. And they should be unpacking what they learnt and what they didn't learn. What didn't work? How can I make it better? And having those conversations is really crucial. It's really crucial. I think when you talk about using technology, there's more conversation, more dialogue happening in a classroom there is in a normal classroom. And that's what I believe there should be. It shouldn't be silent. It shouldn't be headsets on. It shouldn't be locked into space. They should be collaborating and talking and discussing. Creating a multiple of roles. The teachers take a new role. They're not the centre of attention anymore. They're not a guide on the side. They're an integral part of the process. And they can ask the critical questions. They can provide the extra resources to ensure that child's getting as much as possible out of what they're doing. And that's what we're after in the first place. Instigating that collaboration, as I've said, is really important. You need to deconstruct what you've done and build it up again. By undoing what you've done and doing it again allows the child to understand the connections and support each other through that conversation. Giving teachers, I guess, that extra impetus to say, yes, you can go in there, you can coach, you can provide advice, but let the kids go through the process. And if they fail, fine. A lot of work has been found in the industry have actually come to solutions by failure. So let the kids unpack the failure as well. Staff need professional learning, and I guess that's not just an advertising, but that's what I do. But the Professional Teachers Council do understand that the amount of professional learning required to get this type of program running properly is quite a large amount. Teachers need to be supported and given that opportunity to delve into the space and given support to be able to understand what they're doing. It can't be something they just learn quietly by themselves. It has to be a culture built around it. So professional learning needs to be supported in not only the use of technology, but implementation and embedding the technology. And then I think one of the exciting parts that I've noticed too in using technology is the space of assessment and feedback. It's a wonderful space where a teacher can actually work with children, particularly what's come out of COVID at the moment. Where a teacher could, for example, use, and there's a whole range of things. I've got things like Moodle, Edmodo, Schoology, Classian, where a teacher can actually be grading a piece of work live, record it, and send it to the student. It doesn't have to be a grade, and please let's not do grades. Let's get away from grades. So I think there's a movement more and more about getting away from grades. That constructive criticism and feedback is so much more valuable if you're listening to your teacher talk to you about your piece of work or a collaborative piece of work. Then the teacher can deliver it, and the student can then go back and listen to it 2, 3, 4 times if they want to, and really understand what the teacher's talking about, and really understand where they can develop and where they can move on to. So we need to think outside that box, and we need to consider things like screencasts and other software which allows students to really understand their assessment and understand where assessment fits within their scope. I did talk about equity earlier. Equity is an issue. There are many schools at the moment that don't have Wi-Fi strong enough to support the online learning, for example. There are kids at home at the moment who have one laptop or no laptop between a family who's working from home, or the Wi-Fi doesn't work properly, or it's not strong enough, and not all the family members can get online. So equity has come up as quite a major issue. So it is something we can't ignore, and it's certainly come up from what we're learning out of COVID. But on the flip side of that, it also has brought on incredible access to places like museums and art galleries, where students can actually go in virtually and look around a gallery and look at art and do a connectedness between art. The virtual reality space is fantastic in this space because kids can actually play with that space and go into spaces where they can't go in at the moment. They can do so many different things. So that's integration. And we need to look at broader horizons. One of the issues I think that New South Wales has at the moment, we're about to go into a rather large review of curriculum. One of the areas they're talking about is a non-timed approach. I don't know what that looks like yet. I don't think anyone knows what that looks like yet. So the ideal is the child can actually start here and work through to get to there in their own time. Now that's a fantastic theory, and it works great if you're not in a lockstep school where you finish year 7 and you go to year 8, you go 8 to 9. Other kids can get there really quickly. Does that mean a child can go to university at the age of 14 because they've done everything to the best of their ability and they've hit the benchmarks? Don't know. But they're the sort of broader horizons we're looking at, and that's one of the reasons why we need to embed. We need to look at the integration of the software properly. We need to look at the breadth and depth of utilising technology and understand where it can take us. And that's a lot of thought for a teacher that's been working in a classroom that is only using a smart board as a day-to-day tool. This next leap is quite big, and it's coming. It's here in many schools, but it's certainly coming. And I think schools are going to have to start putting a lot more money and energy and authenticity into what they're doing in terms of technology in schools. It's a brave new world full of possibilities, and there is a brave new world in terms of skill development too. These kids are going to come out with a completely different set of skills. Lots of these kids are going to have very high order skills. Some kids are going to be able to use technology because they're not really great at school work, but they're fantastic in terms of working with their hands or visualising and understanding an issue or a problem. Let them have a go at it. Let them play in the real world and let them design and look at real world problems. So I guess what we're saying is more and more studies show that technology integration into the curriculum improves students' learning processes and outcomes. And that's, at the end of the day, that's exactly what we want. We really want to see those kids develop into much stronger global citizens and be able to apply their skills in the real world. And we're going to do them great justice if we let them to do that. So thank you all very much, and it's a great space. A couple of references, but I'll hang around for some questions if anybody's got some.